I've been playing a bunch of Riders Republic these past few days. They have their trial week going on where just before launch, you get like this 4-hour window, which you can just jump in and play the game for free. This lasts, I think, right up until launch on the 28th. I think it goes to like the 27th or so. But I played on a couple accounts. I've spent a bunch of time with it. I think I'm around 10 or so hours. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my impressions so far. Right out the gate, I have to say, I think Riders Republic is really pretty fun, which honestly I was not expecting. What I've been most impressed with is just how satisfying everything feels to play. And honestly, it's also playing this game has made me kind of miss doing extreme sports myself. I used to snowboard and mountain bike quite a lot when I was younger, growing up in like the mountains of New England. That's basically what there was to do. And I think this game nails in a lot of way the feel of that experience of being on the mountaintop covered in snow, of going through the trees. It all feels great. And I think the other thing that has really taken me by surprise, and I knew this was a thing, but just experiencing just how open the whole game is and the world that you play in, the whole space is, well, it's open. So you start out and they take you through this introduction. It holds your hands through the basics of how do you ride your bike in this game and how do you do tricks on the bike and skis and snowboard. And then once you go through that introduction, which lasts like 30 minutes to an hour or so, depending on how quickly you do everything, the game completely opens up. So everything takes place, like I said, on this one massive map. And the map seamlessly blends together various landscapes with different biomes. And apparently most of this, a lot of the big landmarks, are all modeled after real world locations, and we get some landmark feature in the game, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But just as an example of how it works, you could start off on the tippity top of this snow-covered mountain and then go down the edge, snowboarding down these steep cliffs and inclines, or skiing or whatever, and eventually you'll start making your way into the forest. It'll get really dense and you'll have to weave through the trees. You can grind on some like logs that have fallen over and pass and jump over some streams, or launch yourself off of various ramps, whether they're actual man-built ramps or just like these little mounds, doing tricks and stuff along the way. And eventually you'll keep on going, and you can make your way into this desert region. And then all of a sudden, you can just swap what you're riding from your ski or snowboard onto a bike, and you can start hitting up the trails and launching yourself off of rocks. And what I've really loved is how seamless it all is, like quite literally the entire thing. Except for when you first log into the game, you can go from one end of the map all the way to another with 0 loading screens, swapping your equipment along the way at any time, going from a snowboard to a bike to go on this little trail and then go off the trail and switch back to your snowboard or get a snowmobile, all this stuff. And when it comes to these different types of equipments, the game is loaded with a ton of different options. Now, they break these into categories which they call sports. There are snow race and snow trick sports, and these amount to your skis and snowboards. Then there are the bike race and bike trick sports, which are the various types of bikes, road and off-road. There's the air sports, which include things like wingsuits and this rocket wing, which is literally like a rocket pack that you could sail around with. And then finally, there are the exploration and toys, which include things like the snowmobile or the paramotor. Now, beyond having these categories, you will have all of this unique equipment, and these have their own rarity as well as their own stats. Basically, what will happen is as you play, you unlock better stuff, but also things with different strengths and uniquenesses. So like equipment can specialize in various areas. You could have multiple racing style snowboards, but maybe one of them goes slightly faster, but the other one has better handling. So depending on the type of terrain or the type of race that you're in, the competition, whatever, you'll want to swap between the different ones that you have access to. And like I mentioned, you can swap between these on the fly. You could be soaring through the air with this rocket wing, and then you pull up this menu here and you say you want to swap to your snowboard, and it'll automatically equip your snowboard, and you will carry with you the speed and momentum that you had on your rocket wing, and you can use that to like launch off of a ramp and get some massive air. And it all works super fluidly because as you pull up the menu, your character will freeze in place. The world will still progress, like if there's players around you, they'll still be moving. It's not a game pause, but your character just kind of like dematerializes. Then you switch and you come back with the new thing that you have. So this lets you do things like make last minute swaps before crashing, or, you know, sometimes if you do it too slowly, you'll end up crashing. I did that quite a lot when I played. But even if you do crash, it's really not a big deal. There's a couple options. You can either just get back up by spamming the B button. I was playing with an Xbox controller, or there's a rewind mechanic which will take you to a prior point that you can just pick right back up from. So you put all of these mechanics together, you've got this massive seamless open world that blends these mountains and forest and desert regions together, kind of moving in and out of each other. And then you've got all of this different types of equipment, skis and snowboards and different types of bikes and rocket packs, and there's just so much you have. And being able to swap between all this stuff on the fly as you're moving around the terrain and like doing tricks and all this stuff, it does it so well that I've just been spending a good chunk of my time doing just that. I'm just going around and spending time shredding up the mountainside, basically. That's what I've been doing, I'd say, for about half of the playtime that I've spent with riders so far. Everything moment to moment feels really satisfying, especially when you combine that with the fact that you've got all these tricks that you can land. And when it comes to the trick system, it's really simplistic. There's a couple of different input methods that you can choose from. There's like a racer and a trick style. The game recommended starting with a racer, so I just did that. And how it works is pretty simple. Your two joysticks are going to be steering you and moving your camera. But then when it comes to doing spins and tricks, you basically have your face buttons as well as your triggers. So the face buttons are going to decide if you're going to go left and right spin or front or back flip. And then the two triggers indicate what kind of grab that you're doing. And then you hold down the triggers with doing a directional input with the thumbsticks. And that's going to decide what kind of grab you're doing, whether you're doing a nose grab or a tail grab or a board grab or whatever. So you're taking all of these inputs, all of your different grabs and all of your different spins and flips, and you're combining them together, doing these different tricks and trying to land them to score points. And the landing mechanic has a couple of options. There's auto, which will make sure no matter what, you always land after you do a trick, after you launch off a ramp. It's going to position you properly so that your character doesn't crash. But then there's manual, which will make it so that you have to make sure you do your rotations properly and your spins properly, and your ski, boards, or bike are facing in the proper direction so that you wouldn't just eat it. If you do that right, you're going to get a bunch more points. And they also have a auto and manual option for grinding. I haven't gotten into that yet. I mostly was just focused on the manual landing of tricks. Getting good with that feels really satisfying. When you do a spin and rotation and you've got a grab and you do it all properly so that your character comes around and lands just right and you get that perfect landing, you get that little ding sound effect with it as well, and a huge point score. It all feels really good. And there's like account-wide things. As you rack up points, you'll progress with and stuff like that. But then really the big thing when it comes to scoring up points is when you compete in the different competitions and events. And that's kind of the next thing I want to talk about. As much as I have enjoyed just riding around, navigating the terrain, and doing tricks in the open world, the game has a lot of stuff that kind of bring more focus to the things that you do. These different types of events will also help advance your character, and by unlocking things like stars, getting you currency, leveling you up, and that's going to give you access to new gear and new event types and show you more different locations and things that you can do on the map. So the things that you can do that you're going to find on the game's map, first there are the events themselves. They're called events, and these are just dedicated competitions that are scattered all around the world. So you'll see these marked on your map with these little icons, and what you have to do is you'll go to them and then accept them, and this will load you into this like instance. The events come in a few forms. There is the race itself, and these events, it's pretty simple. The goal is to reach the finish line. The faster the better. As you assume, there'll be a whole bunch of difficult turns and obstacles to navigate and things to potentially crash into or mess up your run. You have to try to avoid those. There are the trick events where you are, as you assume, trying to score the highest score possible by landing your tricks, and that's the key. You're not going to get a bunch of points. You can do all these spins and all these grabs and everything in the air, but if you don't actually land it, you're getting nothing out of it. And like I mentioned earlier with how the trick system works, you could auto land, but your score is going to be way lower than if you're choosing to manually land your tricks, and that gives you the potential to get a perfect landing and get a huge boost to your score. These events will come in every one of these sports types. So the snow will have race and tricks, the snowboard, the skis. Bikes will have race and trick events. For the air events, I've only seen races where you're trying to basically go through these aerial checkpoints. I don't know that the air things have a trick system. I'm pretty sure they don't. I haven't seen anything from the time I spent with it. But besides air, the snow and bike will have events for race and tricks. And then there's also some unique events. Specifically, the Shack Daddy events are kind of funny. They'll do all sorts of things. They'll give you crazy equipment. Like I did this one in the desert desert region where I had this rocket propelled bike and I had to make my way through this course. I also did one of these Shack Daddy events that had me trying to deliver a pizza. And then the final type of event, and these are I think one of the coolest and the most competitive, are the mass race events. So these will occur periodically. They don't appear to be always running, but every once in a while you'll get a pop-up that a mass race is taking place. When you see that announcement, you can mark it on your map and teleport straight to it. Speaking of which, you can teleport to any event that you've discovered. It doesn't matter if you're across the map and there's a snowboard event all the way up in the mountains and you're in the desert, you can go straight through there. And the game's actually really good about that in general, getting from point A to point B. There's a ton of fast travel options if you want to use them. And then also once you get that rocket backpack, you can just shoot yourself in the air and go wherever you want. But getting around the map can be as easy or hard as you want. You can take your time kind of just shredding up the hills and stuff, or you can just quickly go to where you want. But yes, same with the mass race event. You can go straight to it. And what's really, really cool about these, there's two main things. The first one is that these mass races combine several sport types into one event. The events will consist of 3 races, one after the other, and each of them will be on a different course with a different combination of sports. So as an example, you might start off one of your legs of this mass race on your skis, and then you go through the ski thing, and then at some point you're going to reach the swap point that will instantly change your equipment to a bike, and then all of a sudden you're going through this bike course, and then it might wrap up with you launching off of this ramp on your bike, and you hit the final checkpoint, and then it throws your rocket wing on your backpack, and then you've got to go through all of these aerial checkpoints. The second cool thing about these mass races is they all involve a ton of real players playing live. A lot of the other events, as far as I'm aware, they're all recordings of players. They're ghosts, essentially, a lot of the other events. But these mass events are all live. Everyone you're playing against is there the moment that you're doing the race. And they involve a ton of other players. The most that I've competed in so far were races around 30, but I have seen some videos out there of race types with over 50 players in them, all competing at once, going through these multiple stages that consist of multiple sports, seamlessly transitioning into each other. It's really, really cool. So that's the event system. And again, this is what you're going to really do and focus on to progress your account. It's going to give you account experience. It's going to give you these star systems. But outside of the events, the world is riddled with a bunch of other things, different types of collectibles and points of interest. So first we've got the relics. These will be marked on the map with this chest icon. And these are unique equipments that you can find and use. So recently I found this crashed plane site, and I went up to it and I found the relic that was this plane wing that I could literally strap on my back. I could use the jet plane wing to fly around instead of my normal rocket backpack. I also found some old wooden skis, which apparently were just really good. They're like straight up just wood, and they're really good for downhill skiing. It's just kind of quirky stuff. At one point I found like a stationary bike, which, you know, it didn't really help get me anywhere because it was stationary. But, you know, it's just an example of the type of things that you can find at these relics. In addition to the relics, there are these landmarks. These will be marked with an eye icon. And these are quite simply some of the notable real world locations that are in the game. So you go and interact with one of these and you're going to get a slow camera pan showing you the landmark in all of its glory. And along with that, there'll be some text on the screen that gives a little background information. This is really cool if you care to learn a little bit about the real places that inspired and that this game's environment are modeled after. I was reading through these at first because I thought it was interesting learning about these different places, but since this was a timed demo, I ended up skipping through these near the end. I just collected them and then spammed exit, basically. And then the last type of thing, the structured thing that you will encounter out in the world, are these stunts. Now, from what I've seen, these look to kind of be technical challenges. These are different from the events, like the race event and the trick events, as they're kind of more about navigation than trying to get to a finish line or reach a certain score. The couple that I've done have actually been bike events, and they were specifically focused on trying to carefully make your way through this obstacle course, essentially, of having to slowly navigate these really narrow areas and make these gaps without falling off of the edge, essentially. And they keep you in place by making sure you have to hit these check marks. If you go past a check mark, they will force you to rewind. These have been very difficult as well. They require so much precision of your riding and making your way across, like I said, these narrow beams. At first, when I started doing these, I had a very difficult time. I just was not figuring it out. I was horrible, actually. So yeah, that's the different types of things that you will find in the world besides the free roam thing. And I do want to quickly touch on a little bit of more information about like the map itself and just the landscape, the environment. So as I mentioned, the map is made up of these numerous regions and they're all stitched together. Basically speaking, it's a combination of mountainous areas, forest areas, and desert regions. And there are these transitional areas in between. So as you're making your way down the snow-covered mountain, eventually you'll start to see a few trees here and there. And then over time, the trees will grow in size and density. And eventually you might find yourself in a full-blown forest. And then you'll go through the forest, and the same sort of transition will happen as you move into a town or another mountain area, or eventually into the desert region. But it isn't just like there's one mountain, one forest area, and one desert. That is generally how the map trends, from the northern area being where the mountains are and the southern area being where most of the desert is. But it blends in between with different sorts of peaks and valleys here and there, swapping between the biomes with those sort of transitions that I mentioned. There's also various park locations, even cities on the map, and the cities will be full, as you expect, with ramps and rails for you to do tricks off of. There'll be little stunt areas, and that's the other really cool thing too. All of these events that I talked about, the different types of trick events and race events, they're also on the map in the game. I can be going through the game and I can be going down this mountain and I can come across a track and just go through it, and I can see other people that are actually competing in that thing. And I do want to touch on how other players play into this as well. So while you're doing everything, you will see other players all over the place. You'll see them going down the same mountains, racing on the same tracks, jumping and doing tricks all around you. There's even a bunch of NPC chatter. You'll hear them shouting and going like Yahoo and all that kind of stuff. Now, when I first saw this and I just saw the sheer density of people, I was blown away because the number of characters all around is crazy. There are like hundreds and hundreds of characters all over the place on any given track, on any given mountainside at any time. In fact, when you pull up the map, you can see them indicated with all of these little white icons that as they're all moving around these trails. In fact, one thing that I did was to try to figure out like where's good places to go. I would look at where all the little white icons were. So at first I thought this was crazy. I was like, wow, look at this game. There's people all over the place. However, later I did learn that most of them are just ghosts. They're basically recordings of actions that, yes, a real player took at one point, but they are not actively there moving in real time with you. Now, the yellow markers, those are real players. The thing is, like, sometimes I'd just see like one or two of them, and occasionally I would see them clustered, but by and large, I don't think I've ever seen more than like 5 or 6 yellow icons in an area at once. And that's fine. It's just I was a little bit disappointed because at first I thought there was just constantly hundreds and thousands of real players constantly moving all around me. This is most certainly like a technical limitation thing. And it makes sense to me because, like I said, this map seems pretty darn huge in the 8 or 9 hours that I've played of the game so far. It's pretty big. There's a lot to see and a lot to explore. So if you were to constantly have like thousands of people playing all at the same time on the same servers, probably run into some like syncing issues and things like that. Although since it's not like a competitive game where you're hitting hit markers, I don't know, maybe they could have done it, but they didn't. And at most, there will be like a handful of real players around you. Most of them are just ghosts. It's something to consider. Again, a little disappointing, but it's not really the end of the world. One of the other big things I should talk about here is the main social hub in the game. This is this location called Riders Ridge. You go there pretty early in the tutorial, and then when you make your way through the introduction, you eventually unlock all of these different little areas within it, and they basically function as an interactive menu. So there's several things that you can do at Riders Ridge. First, there is the Tricks Academy, and these give you these little events that you can do that act as further tutorial specifically for tricks. So they will teach you how to properly do the different kind of spins, the different kind of grabs, the different types of grinding. They'll teach you how to use the half pipe and everything. It's really, really helpful. And this will work for both the snow events and the bike events. There's also the Shock Daddy challenges. Like I mentioned, the Shock Daddy events are kind of crazy, nutty things like rocket propelled bikes. Challenges give you further things to do for them. There are the sponsors. These are sort of like daily quests. You can equip 3 sponsors at any given time. You will unlock more as you progress your account by doing things like the events and everything. And the sponsors will just give you special activities to complete every day for rewards. And you can select which 3 that you want to do stuff for in any given day. There's also some areas for some of the competition to get you right into it. So there's a mass race pad area. You can just go there, and if there's a mass race going on, it's going to queue you up for it. There's also multiplayer queues for some competitive free-for-all and competitive tricks battles. These are super cool because they're teams doing tricks against each other, trying to score the highest score as a team. Pretty neat. I didn't spend any time with it, but it looks super cool, and I definitely want to try it out. There's also a shop in here where you can buy different cosmetics. Now, I was able to purchase stuff with in-game currency, but there is a real-world money option, so clearly they're going to be selling skins that are probably pretty expensive for people to buy. And one funny thing too is when it comes to the narrative in this game, they deliver it in this really interesting way. So basically, as you play through, you're essentially taking part in what appears to be this extreme sports reality TV show. The whole concept is like you're this up-and-coming rider and you're going to make your way through these different events until you get to the big show, you know, you get the idea. But there's a couple of characters. Honestly, I thought they were pretty funny, especially, like I said, growing up snowboarding and mountain biking and skateboarding. Like some of these characters' personalities that they have in this game, it is a little corny, but it's also not too far from reality in my experience. But yeah, so for some closing thoughts here, I will say there's a couple of things that I'm a little concerned by. One of my biggest critiques, honestly, is just at times the game looks super flat. A few areas in the game, some of the landscapes and the plant life and the trees, they look super low poly and fairly bad, to be honest with you. And I double checked, I was running everything on the highest graphical setting, ultra and high, wherever it was available. But regardless, some of this stuff just looked super bad. I am going to have to assume a lot of this is just due to the sheer size of the game world, along with the number of players around, ghost or real. There's just a lot going on. It's a big game. It's a seamless game with no loading screens unless you teleport. I guess it makes sense that some of it looks pretty bad. It just, you know, I was a little disappointed. I guess it's also not a huge deal though, given the speed of a game like this. You are constantly going super fast, so things don't need to look super good up close, I suppose. It would be nice if they looked a little better, but it is what it is. And then another thing I've been thinking about is I don't really know how long I would play a game like this. I have been genuinely having an excellent time. Like I said, I think it feels super good to play. It's a lot of fun. It's super satisfying going down these slopes and doing these tricks and nailing everything and swapping different vehicles, like riding through these various terrains from the snow-capped mountains to the dense forest, the arid desert, going through towns and going in and out of different tracks all along the way, swapping as well from my snowboard to my wingsuit and then going onto a bike and putting on the rocket booster. It's just crazy. And it all feels really, really good. It's just like, could I see myself playing this game for more than a couple of weeks? Personally, no, not really. I'm not the biggest extreme sports or racing fan. I guess that's worth noting. I don't play games like this very often. But again, I have been playing this and really, really liking it. I've loved my first several hours with the game. And if I have the time, I want to keep on playing. There's a lot of stuff coming out and I'm trying to cover and play a lot of games, but I have really been genuinely enjoying it. It feels good. Everything feels really good. And I also want to say, I love some of the little details that they have in this game. Your character will balance their bike while you're standing still by slightly rocking their front tire, or they'll shimmy their snowboard from standstill into moving. If you get on some flat terrain, they'll start rocking their arms to try to get more speed. And that is all super authentic from my experience of doing this stuff in real life. And I love those little touches that they put in this game. But to wrap it up, I have been having a good time. I think this has been pretty fun. If you like racing games, if you like sports games, extreme sports games, this one might be worth checking out. I've been having a good time with Riders Republic. I hope to play some more, and we'll see if I end up putting out like a full-on review later on. But at the very least, first impressions here are it's pretty fun. There's a lot going on. It's pretty diverse, and I've really enjoyed it. So there you go. Those are some of my impressions of Riders Republic. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.